gentlemen, we just landed in Geneva. Yeah, that's in Switzerland.
Frankenstein is an incredibly queer novel. Please just hear me out on this. I'll give some background to the story itself and the author. A cornerstone of Gothic literature, Frankenstein prides itself with the deeply metaphorical nature it presents. It was written by one Mary Shelley, circa 1818, and was one of the first prominent examples of what would come to be known as a genre of science fiction. Her life was essentially a drama, filled with so much death and heartbreak that it would give Poe a run for his money in the keystone 19th century writers that had questionable upbringings whose life decisions are difficult to judge in society's modern standards competition. But don't get it twisted, she was still very much a bit of a strange individual, but we love her for that. You need to be a bit of a strange person to write a story as compelling as this, anyway. Both of her parents were renowned philosophers, and this, paired with her love of literature, makes it clear why Frankenstein is rife with so many different interpretations. It can be seen as a cautionary tale of the misuse of intellect, a mythical spin on social injustices to disabled or less fortunate individuals in society, an allegory for the dangers of pregnancy and postpartum guilt. I'm sure you can extrapolate how loaded this book can be. One of the strengths of metaphorical writing like this is that it will always stay perpetually relevant in some shape or form. This very factor means that me, a random queer girl thing, a couple of centuries later, can wokeify the story as much as I want. Frankenstein takes place in Geneva, Switzerland, possibly inspired by Shelley's own experience in visiting Lake Geneva, as per Sir Tyler Baudelaire's own words.
Drunk Geneva water the best.
Other events, such as her witnessing Luigi Galvani, the father of Galvanism, present to the public his abilities to manipulate muscles of a cadaver, also inspired her. The novel is unique in its storytelling, as it centers around a frame narrative. As the name suggests, it follows different perspectives of different characters. However, it's primarily narrated by Robert Walton, an inquisitive nepo baby that wants to add some glory to his gold through scientific expedition. He then meets Victor Frankenstein on his voyage and saves him from an icy outpost. Okay, I just need to say, even before I delve into the homosexual rigmarole within the story beats, Walton doesn't even make an entirely compelling case that he's swinging for the hetero team. Like, he talks about how he wants a companion above all else and actively swoons over Victor. If only she could see where we're at today. But I digress. At this point in the story, I believe many of you are already aware of what occurs. Extremely brief rundown, Victor becomes infatuated with the prospect of the dichotomy between life and death, but perverting it to push the precipice of what's considered impossible in science. He creates a being that is nameless and not named Frankenstein. However, I'd be willing to call him Little Frankie if there are any takers. And he becomes radicalized into a force of nature that slowly but surely picks off Victor's loved ones in a grandiose act of vengeance due to being created, as well as the abuse and prejudice he's subjected to universally. It is my belief that the theming of motherhood is what Shelley was aiming to primarily express within her work. That doesn't mean we're not allowed to view it through any other lenses. If we were to view it through the prospect of this being a predominantly queer story, we're able to see some stark parallels. Although the theming of identity and social authorization isn't necessarily exclusive to the queer experience, it is still a major factor within it. Take the creature, for example. In it, he's often referred to as a monster, a common term to dehumanize select groups of individuals. The origin of the word also relates to divine punishment, but we can go more in depth with the religious theming later. The creature can be seen as a queer individual, such as a transgender or intersex person, serving as a stand-in for marginalized people. This can be hammered in more with the elements of body horror present as well, as the creature's vessel is a mashed-up conglomerate of cadavers filled with sinews. Many people who suffer with gender dysphoria or any body image issue can understand this feeling of being unable to be comfortable with your own self, as your body seems almost alien sometimes, and with the constant beratement he experiences that pushes his once tender soul over the edge into resort to violence, this serves as a pretty effective allegory for the experience many individuals may feel. These highlights aren't mutually exclusive, though. The creature is only one side of the same coin, with Victor matching the other. The creature even views himself as a bastardization of the story of Adam's creation in the Bible, thinking he is an innately flawed creature that is impure. This religious guilt can be attributed to many individuals throughout history and even today, as falsified testaments are used to apprehend the very existence of queer expression, which was the status quo in the 19th century. His need for a companion, which Victor actively denies, can represent the denial of one's own queer identity, and how people are more willing to deny themselves and what they need in order to conform with society. But what if we view it through Victor's perspective? All things considered, he doesn't seem to be entirely straight. He spends incredibly long periods of time either working on his creation or around his male companions while ignoring any feminine love interest. Mostly he spends time with his good friend, Henry Clerval. You know the whole historians say they were good friends joke? I'm willing to bet 4 pence that this was partly inspired by it. Although nothing is said to have arisen from their lengthy expeditions, it still is a bit strange. Before he marries his fiancée and adoptive sister, Elizabeth, he takes a 2-year excursion with Clerval across England. Like, come on, imagine your husband's like, I love you, but I want to hang out with my best friend for 24 months. Okay, bye. Anyway, Victor is very much a stand-in for the queer experience as well. In this context, let's use the existence of the monster as an allegory for gay identity. Victor is consistently abhorred and taken aback by his own creation, most notably when he brings it to life, despite the fact he went out of his way to collect the best parts to build a creature. With that, even he describes himself as being beautiful. His reaction can be seen almost like a gay awakening. He realizes an aspect of himself that has been laid dormant for his entire life until now, which terrifies him with a myriad of implications. His obsession with the creature is harmful as it overshadows the relationship with Elizabeth. Come to think of it, the creature slowly killing off the other characters as the story progresses can be equated to people learning of your identity and deciding to abandon you, or it can be seen as self-isolation. As in this context, you would be slowly withdrawing from everyone out of fear that your identity could be discovered, killing those relationships. Possibly the most noteworthy instance of this is in a later section of the novel. The creature consistently implores for Victor to create a partner for him so his loneliness and solitude can be accounted for. But halfway through, Victor destroys this fabled companion. Much to the dismay of the creature, he vows to kill Elizabeth, specifically on their wedding night. Considering the theming we've extracted at this point, we can interpret this as Victor failing to satiate his true romantic needs, hoping that his bonding with Elizabeth can fix him and make everything go away. Which, I should clarify, even with all the warning the creature gave, he made zero attempt to warn or protect Elizabeth at all. This isn't even a one-time thing. He's let this happen multiple times, causing people to get indirectly killed due to his own willful obliviousness. So remember kids, if you don't create a companion to the harbinger of gay metaphors, he will eviscerate your entire family. As I've previously stated, Frankenstein's unorthodox and unique nature of storytelling gives it the advantage of surviving as an immortal metaphor. But if you haven't read the story, you have no idea how nuanced this tale truly is. You may know some certain story beats for the most part, but the way Frankenstein is presented today is an imitation of its origin, much like other classic monster figures such as Dracula. The creature is colloquially known as Frankenstein now. He apparently hates fires despite the fact he self-immolates at the end of the book. Oh, a spoiler warning for a 200-year-old book, I guess. He has a wife sometimes and is much more violent in nature. For all intents and purposes, this novel serves as a retelling of Shelley's life and her thoughts at the time, but through a dramatized, absurdist scope. Her mother died when Shelley was only 11 days old, leaving her to only read her past works to understand her mother better. She was an active voice in women's suffrage, which could explain the elements of patriarchy seen in the novel, along with the theming of motherhood, death, life, and rebirth. Mary was also speculated by historians to have possibly been bisexual, as she has written accounts of her proclaiming that she would get tousy-mousy for women, especially after her husband's death. All of these culminate into a truly beautiful story about self-reflection and acceptance, as writing was an escape for her. Unfortunately, a lot of these themes are missing or even fully replaced in modern interpretations of her work, which is a huge shame in my opinion. Despite that, I believe I found one of the best modern interpretations of a queer reading of the story, although it is more of a personal translation than a direct retelling. Here, I'll give a few hints for anyone to guess before I reveal it. It's not a rewrite, play, or movie. It heavily revolves around the queer experience and the fear of your identity being discovered. It also features themes of murder, sorrow, guilt, acceptance, and heartbreak. It won an award in 2019, and the person who produced it also produced the music you've been hearing thus far. It's Igor. It's the album Igor. Yup, believe it or not, the album Igor by Tyler, the Creator is pretty similar to the theming scene within the book. There is a reason it's called Igor. The names for these albums aren't chosen without good justification. Tyler is very particular in the names of his alter egos. For example, the album he released after Igor, Call Me If You Get Lost, features the alter ego Tyler Baudelaire, which is named after a wealthy family's last name in the book A Series of Unfortunate Events. In the album, he flexes his lavish lifestyle and takes a vacation to, I kid you not, Lake Geneva, Switzerland. Coincidence? That's not all though. For the character of Igor in Frankenstein, he was introduced in more recent versions of the scripture. In the story's context, he is Victor's side assistant that aids in his mad scientist mechanisms, but outside the story, he serves as a self-insert for the audience to help better understand the plot, as since it's a frame narrative, which can't really be integrated into a play cleanly. Igor later gained the connotation of someone who is smaller and underappreciated, much like how Tyler's alter ego, also known as Igor, feels throughout the album. Wait, hold on, give me a sec. Yummy. I won't get too in-depth into the plot of the album because it's right there for you to listen to, and you definitely should, but I will give a brief synopsis to highlight the parallels. The album follows Tyler, who recently breaks up with his ex-boyfriend. His ex, in fear of his sexual orientation becoming known, gets back with his ex-girlfriend. This makes Tyler spiral, causing him to go through all stages of grief, which can be observed in the track list. The song New Magic Wand is a strong contender for a close allegory, as he goes into depth about how he wants to kill his ex's girlfriend for a chance to get him back. Not dissimilar to the creature wanting to kill Elizabeth after Victor tears apart his potential companion in front of his own eyes. A notable change is made after the song What's Good, where after he reinvents himself as the alter ego Igor, he states, I see the light, which is reminiscent of the creature gaining his consciousness as a living being. His alter ego is like a combination of both the repression and drive of Victor and the slowly degrading humility of the creature. After this point, however, is where Igor becomes an antithesis to these characters. Instead of digging into a deeper hole, he accepts the loss of his love and attempts to move on. This is for naught, as the story, and subsequently the album, repeats, causing Igor to suffer through the repetitive heartbreak instead, much like how hatred and discrimination feeds itself and is able to stick around for centuries with no signs of stopping. Am I looking too far into things? Maybe. Was this all a ruse for me to have an excuse to talk about this album in any shape or form? Oh yeah, definitely. But this just goes to show how widely applicable a narrative as anamorphous as this can be, even centuries later. I'm not trying to say my interpretation is the correct one. I wanted to highlight how an opus such as this is able to reach the hearts of so many people. That is the beauty of storytelling after all. Anybody can have their own unique interpretation of something, and it can mean just as much as your own interpretation. Okay, I don't know about the whole making him a bumbling mass of living flesh though. We need to bring back the intellectual creature that internalizes and equates himself to Satan. So kids, what did we learn today? It's that if there's any comparison between this book, this album, and my love life, it's that it never ends well.
Woke up in Geneva. Oh man, I did it again, didn't I?